right, let's go ahead and get started. This is Business Builders Weekly. We are in a series, Leaders Eat Last, the hunger for leadership. If you've been with us for the first two parts of this, and maybe you're coming into this and you're jumping in at part three because you want to see what's closer to the end than at the beginning, you're in the right place. But with that, I want to kind of go through a little bit of a backtrack so we can review where we've come from, so we can go to where we want to land. With Leaders Eat Last, if you're familiar with the book from Simon Sinek, it's a great book, great leadership book for not just young leaders or new leaders, but really leaders that are wanting to reimagine what leadership truly can look like inside of their organization, inside of their four walls, or out in the field. Wherever your business, wherever your industry really keeps you, takes you, what I want this leadership training to be more or less is creating these guideposts of what leadership can look like inside of your business. So let's go ahead and jump into reviewing the last two parts of this, the first two parts that we jumped off on. Part one, we discussed the biology of leadership. Really, what are those, really at the core of us as humans, there are hormonal areas of leadership that we can address, whether that's dopamine all the way down to cortisol, the positive versus the negative of what we trigger or infuse into our people. And a lot of times this is unbeknownst to us. It's unintentional because we don't know what we don't know. But now in part one, we now know what we didn't know. The circle of safety, creating this idea and a culture where we're protective of the people inside of the business more than we are the outside of the business. We talked about briefly the customer service cycle, or the customer service value proposition, where it's more valuable, and it's not even necessarily intuitive, but it's more valuable for us to pay attention to the team inside of our walls versus the customer outside of our walls. If we generate a higher degree of belonging and purpose inside of our wall with our teams, they will deploy that customer service and care and purpose to our customers. And then the hunger in purpose. This can also be talked about as the hunger for purpose. People want to go to work on purpose. Just like you started a business because you were disenfranchised with either the industry that you're a part of, or maybe the business owner, or maybe just the leadership that you were falling under in your previous experience. Creating this environment where people that are looking for something bigger than themselves, looking for a bigger purpose, are able to find that inside of your business. And then part two, last week we talked about the trust is the foundation of leadership. Everything else can rise and fall, but it will all come down to the foundation that you've laid in your leadership. Your team will succeed or fail on your ability to build, keep, and foster trust in your environment. Leaders are stewards of culture. I will say, being in the HR industry for close to 20 years, we have seen this buzzword of culture, of environment, of people. It's all rubbish if it doesn't come down to stewardship of that culture. As leaders, we have to not only create the environment that we want to be a part of, we also have to steward and really care for, just like a gardener of a garden, a farmer of a field. We have to cultivate and de-weed at times to make sure that the crop of the seed that we're sowing day in and day out produces good fruit. And then lastly, we discussed belonging versus bureaucracy. This idea of not only cascading purpose, but stewardship of the culture, and then allowing people the belonging. That is oftentimes where we see large groups of our work environment, our staff, our retention start to drop off, because we know Gallup polls tell us they survey every year about 100,000 businesses. And what we know is that out of every employee, only about 33% are actively engaged in their role. Only 33%, if we want to say it a little bit different, have actively found purpose in the position they've been put. That should terrify you, because what that tells me as a people strategist is that 67% of the workforce is disengaged or actively disengaged, meaning they are actively working against the vision and mission that you've cast inside of your business. So creating this culture of belonging where people love to be where they're at and who they're doing it with. We ended last week's time, and if you weren't with us or you're just jumping into this, I would take a screenshot of this trust health inventory. So with this, we kind of went in through asking questions of the business. So looking at what this should look like for our team, what this looks like for me as an organization, asking ourselves the hard questions, and then taking the next step in accountability and discipline to score it. To not only be okay with whatever the score tells us, because emotions of what we feel it should be versus what it is can be two different things. And the data is really hard to ignore once you've seen it. As they say with any type of traumatic event, it's hard to unsee what you've just saw. So how do you score it? What is the barometer? Again, take a screenshot of this. This will be assets that we upload in the coming weeks. But since you're on the live call, take a screenshot of this, the scoreboard of how healthy you are in your trust equation of building your culture. So with this week's conversation, we're going to take the next steps in our leadership in what that means with putting the team before self and really getting granular into what that can look like for us as leaders. Great leaders sacrifice personal comfort, recognition, and even resources so their teams can succeed. If you're on this call, if you're in this training, you are either a business owner or a key stakeholder that's looking to grow and scale. I would say, if you're being honest, if you've been in business for longer than 3 months, you have sacrificed personal comfort, recognition, and even resources, whether that's monetary or physical resources that you're able to take advantage of that you may have had as an employee that you now do not have or can't provide to your family or your team. What I think is really important is I kind of live and die by this saying. I honestly couldn't tell you if I made it up or if I heard it from somebody. I've been saying it for that long. But anybody that comes into my environment, whether that's personally or professionally, I want them to know that whether I'm taking a leadership role in their life or their career, I want them to feel, I want them to know that I care deeply about their success personally and professionally, to the point to where I've taken ownership to a varying degree of the results and outcomes of their time with me. I want people to know that if you have a relationship with me, it's no longer acceptable for you to suffer in silence and it's equally or maybe even disproportionately not allowed to succeed in a silo. So I don't want you to suffer in silence. We know, I know personally, we know as a business group, business ownership can be an incredibly lonely place to be. Do not allow yourself to suffer in silence, but equally do not allow yourself to succeed in a silo. Meaning, if you have a win, big or small, share it with a spouse. Show up to these calls ready to share wins. Oh, are you guys not seeing my screen? Yes, you are meant to be seeing something. I'm sorry. There you go. So, with that being said, if we can all agree, whether you're watching this in September of 2025 or you're watching this down the road somewhere, agree to not suffering in silence or succeeding in a silo. Be willing to share both the hardships, the things that are not perfect and polished, as well as sharing the things that are going well. And I will tell you, as a high D on the disc, I can ignore the 9 things that go right in my day and focus in on that one thing that didn't go right. And if I allow myself, I will derail my whole day, possibly my week, but most likely my day, in focusing on the one thing and ignoring the 9 things that went unbelievably well. Great leaders are willing to sacrifice the numbers to save the people. Poor leaders sacrifice the people to save the numbers. I'm reminded of a passage in scripture where he talks about, in a parable, leaving the 99 to get the one. It's really about, how do I put the team before self? How am I leading my team well? And why does it even matter? I just need the business to succeed, right? Why does it matter for business owners? When leaders put themselves first, employees notice. I've been a part of great, phenomenal environments. I've also been a part of very detrimental environments. I will tell you, a healthy environment, people are rowing in the same direction and they're rowing hard because they believe in the mission of what that organization says that they're about. And the moment that they lose that trust with the team, you will find that they will actively disengage from that mission, because it goes from being a mission to being a means to an end, a paycheck to a bill. It's A to B, C to D. It doesn't become this big vision anymore. When us as leaders, us as business owners, maybe we have disproportionate pay, and maybe it's not just monetary. Maybe it's in your willingness or consistency in showing up physically or emotionally to the team. Disproportionate pay or disproportionate compensation can look at a lot of different ways, but I can tell you that people notice. Your team will take notice if you say one thing, meaning, I need everybody to work 50 to 60 hours this week because we need to show up for clients. And then they unfortunately see your post where you're doing a lot of life leisure things, or maybe you're doing things that are misaligned with what you actually said in this group huddle, in this rah to get everybody riled up, but then your actions say something different. I can tell you, whether it's as a parent or a leader, people care less about what you say, and they care significantly more about what you do. And maybe you're in a business to where you are the spotlight. Maybe you spotlight lifestyle, But then what you're telling people in your business is to make sacrifices, to keep it lean, but then you're portraying something very different. I I'm reminded of a landscaper client that I worked with years ago. He was constantly being pushed to pay his team more. They were, from a market data standpoint, they were disproportionately paying low wages for the market, and yet he would post his Lamborghini and track days, and it was completely disconnected from the hustle and grind that he was pitching in team meetings and in his all team huddles. And then he would go and have this almost a Jekyll and Hyde type of lifestyle. It's completely disconnected. And his justification was, I need landscaping clients that can afford the lifestyle that I'm portraying. But his pay to his team members was disproportionately low to the talent that he wanted to bring into the business. When leaders put the team first, loyalty grows because people feel valued. I will tell you firsthand, wages are secondary to the way that you make somebody feel. If people feel that they are showing up for a bigger purpose than themselves, they want to be a part of that. I actually have a close friend. She worked for an organization that was growing and scaling, and the opportunities that she got coming in, she was an operations coordinator coming in with 3 to 5 years of experience, but she was a hustler. She was willing to learn anything and everything that she could possibly take in. Fast forward 2 years, she had become disenchanted to the money that she was making because of the way that that environment made her feel. Fast forward another 6 months, she found a purpose-driven organization that she was able to hitch her purpose, her personal mission, to the mission and vision of those entrepreneurs that started the business. And she is happier than she's ever been. I talked to her probably about 2 months ago, and she's happier than she's ever been professionally. She's making about 35% less every year moving forward, but she's got big purpose. She's got big meaning, and she believes in where they're going with the organization. So if you tell me that people only care about what they take home every 2 weeks, I can give you example after example that if you lead with your team first, they will be loyal, but they will also feel valued. This has got a typo. But putting your team first signals of team before self. Leaders take the blame publicly, but give credit publicly. This is number one for so many reasons. But as I've spent a better part of my career helping managers become leaders, owners, entrepreneurs become leaders, helping supervisors become leaders, this is like paramount to this exercise. How many of you, maybe by a show of hands or maybe even the chat or maybe internally, you would say, you've heard the saying, if I correct them in public, it will send a message to the room that I'm not messing around. We feel like if we correct in public that one person that is misaligned with the activities or maybe misaligned with the job, that the whole team needs to hear that message and get it, so I don't have to deliver it 3 different times. And yet that same manager will sidebar the compliments and the praise and the accolades and make sure that you're doing a great job. Leaders invest in training, tools, or well-being before paying themselves extra. I have had so many of these conversations, and maybe some of you on this training have had these conversations internally with yourself. You see an increase of 15 to 20% in your maybe your profitability or maybe your revenue, and it's been tight the last 12 to 24 months. And you could reinvest those things into your team to expedite the training or maybe the service delivery to your customers. But it allows you to take that one notch in your belt out. I would caution you, and not to say that right sizing your compensation is wrong, but if your compensation is right sized for the market, but you feel like you deserve it, but underutilizing or under providing tools and resources to your team, I would ask yourself this question. Are there tools and resources? Are there well-being measures that I could be putting into my team to make sure that they know that they're cared for more than the 8 to 5, but they know that I'm investing in them from 5 to 8 when they're not here? Leaders make decisions through the lens of what's best for my people, not what's easiest for me. It would seem for great leaders that this would be very intuitive. But from my perspective, it's not as intuitive as I would like it to be. When I ask myself what's best for my people, I'm looking at all three phases of their life, not just their employment, but their life, personally, professionally, financially. Each one of our team members come in sharing their target 12 goals for the next 1, 3, and 5 years. We have a very specific layout that we follow in building out those target 12 goals, to where every 90 days we're addressing personal, professional, financial. We're building in discipline and accountability into our ability to embolden our team to take action towards those goals. Anytime that we're having a budget conversation, whether that's weekly reviews or monthly or quarterlies, the first question that we ask is, what more can we do for our people? Whether that's rolling out benefits plans or making sure that the insurance that we're putting out there is truly beneficial. Maybe it's streamlining onboarding. What is it that we're doing to help our people that have joined our vision and made it their purpose to be successful? How are we showing up for them in the hours between 5 and 8 when they're reinvesting their time, talent, and resources into their family and friends? In the Marines, and I kind of alluded to this a little bit last week, but in the Marines, the most senior leaders eat last. And why is that? Because their role is to ensure their people are fed, protected, and ready. Business is no different. When leaders go last, everyone wins. This is where the leadership equation really rubber meets road. Those hard decisions of, am I going to right size my undercapitalization in my compensation plan? When I make sure that everybody in my environment is fed, protected, and ready, I know that all of that will raise the bar in how my people show up. I talk about my family a lot on here, and it's something that I take deeply personal in the way that I show up for team members, whether that's showing up for a sales consultant that has got a really involved prospect that they feel like if they could just get them in front of an HR person to help them understand the vision, how am I showing up? Even when it doesn't fit in my schedule, how am I moving things around to make sure I show up? When it comes to my kids, which my spouse and my kids are kind of the barometer of my leadership. If I'm not willing to invest my leadership skills and ability, time and talent into them, everything else is a percentage of my willingness to show up for them. So how I show up for my team is a clear mirror image of how I show up for my internal team. And I would even put that back on you as stakeholders, you as leaders. How are you showing up at home? And then after you get really granular, take in the gravity of that. How are you showing up for your team? How are you showing up for your leadership team that is on the front lines of leadership with your employees? There's a high cost to all of this. So the cost of selfless leadership. Selfish leadership is when leaders prioritize personal gain, recognition, or comfort over the team's well-being. I am reminded of my first real professional setting. If you've been around me, you know that I came from the professional sports industry, where my first setting was in the Major League Baseball organization out here in Arizona. I am so incredibly blessed to have fallen under that leadership, not only directly in my team, in my managers and supervisors, but also from an executive leadership. They were incredible at leading people well with purpose, whether that was the engagement that they were willing to provide on a daily and weekly, quarterly measure, but also in how they thought through how they led us well. That selfish leadership is going to look at personal gain. How can I better my lifestyle? How can I get the next award or recognition on the backs of my people without giving them the due recognition? I will tell you firsthand, when we receive awards or accolades, or we get even praise from clients, we deflect a lot, and almost to an uncomfortable amount, to putting that back on the back office people that built the thing, that did the thing, that got the result. I will tell you that I spend many days, like many of you, in this space of discomfort. And over the better part of now 7-8 years of entrepreneurship and business ownership, I've gotten really comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's something that if you're not there, you better get there, because you're going to spend a lot of time in discomfort being a quality, selfless leader. Why it matters to small business. And again, when I'm talking about small business in this context, I'm referring to those first 4 or 5 pressure points when we look at growth and scaling. So anything sub 10 million in revenue, that's what I'm referring to. In a small and medium-sized business, every decision echoes loudly. From personal experience, the decisions that you make, the impact that you have, positive or negative, is not a one-time, one-hit wonder. It will echo through the corridors of your environment. So whether it's a good decision, the echoes are a lot lighter. The poor decisions, or maybe even bad decisions, echo even louder. And your willingness to be humble, decisive, purpose-driven in your decision-making, especially early on, is imperative to driving the noise that echoes in your halls. If employees sense exploitation, favoritism, or greed, the culture decays fast. I have seen this in so many different ways. It's almost uncomfortable to even talk about, because I can see faces that go with these stories. I'm reminded of a group in Florida. This was a couple of years back. The business had really struggled along for the better part of 10 years. They were in the construction industry, and Florida's a great postcard to send. You got great beaches, you got cool shore waters, but at the end of the day, the summers are absolutely brutal, and they're in construction, and so they had kind of struggled along doing 6 to 8 million plus minus, kind of going up and down, but providing relatively consistent work and paying average wages. But they landed a couple of big jobs, and the owner was the only one that benefited from that. And these were long jobs. This was very extended scopes of work with very consolidated deadlines. And the feedback, the caution to this, I'll call him an owner, just because he was a lot less leader at that point. The caution was, the decisions that you're making, if you continue along this track, your team will figure it out. They're not dumb. Your leadership team will figure it out. They're not dumb. And if you don't change the trajectory of your decisions moving forward, this is what the next 180 days looks like in the business. I talked about the humble leader earlier. This individual pushed back fervently against every one of those yield signs that we put up in front of him. Not to any of our credit, but everything that we laid out that was going to happen if he didn't change course in the decisions ended up happening. His business took a complete 180 to about $3 to $4 million in revenue in the subsequent years. So caution this. This is leadership training for the sake of driving better results in your business. When we look at the consequences of selfish leadership, we get high turnover, we get low morale, and we get a reputation that ends up damaged. Whether it's the word spreading online or, God forbid, word of mouth, because that's even worse. It comes with more credibility and more velocity than even Glassdoor or Indeed reviews. But it makes it incredibly hard to attract top talent, loyal customers, because people are your customer. At the end of the day, Dale Carnegie talks about it in Winning Friends and Influencing People. People are your customer. You might be doing business with an entity, an organization, or a product, but people are the stop to all of that. So the consequences to that selfish leadership, if you want to destroy morale, go in reckless abandon of being a selfish leader. Employees will disengage. I can put money on it. I will put that deposit slip at the bank and cash it every day with every bank. They will take that deposit. People leave bosses, not companies. I think bosses, or boss, is the dirtiest and most offensive four-letter word in all of the cussing lexicon. And I say that in full confidence that if you want to destroy something, go ahead and be a boss. Let me... So when we look at this, the most serious failure of leadership is the failure to foresee. We talk about the 4 phases of business growth and scaling. You have foundation, you have fortification, you have foresight. This is a leadership issue. If you aren't getting the data, getting comfortable with the data, and getting comfortable asking questions of the data, then you're not giving your business and you're not giving your team the foresight needed to make those quality decisions. And then going back, you're also going to have bad decisions echoing down the corridors of the halls of your business. Whether you're an all digital virtual world or you physically are in brick and mortar, you will find that the echoes are louder on the negative side. When you look at service, service solves ego. I will tell you from my own heart, and this is not to pump myself up. We had I'll say a big storm. It wasn't a big storm. We had some patio furniture that blew over. We had some branches that break. We don't get a lot of like serious weather contextually to the rest of the country here in Arizona. But we did have a monsoon blow through 2 nights ago, and we had a neighbor reach out via the Facebook community and just say, hey, it's a single mom. She had a couple of branches blow over into her fence and, whatever. She doesn't have a chainsaw. Not a big deal. It was 15 minutes worth of work. I could have gone and just taken care of it in the morning, but I actually took both my boys with me. They're 12 and 14. I didn't want them to go just to watch dad do the thing. I took them because I want them to start thinking more thoughts of others focused. Our mission as a family is to be Christ-centered, others focused, here to serve, happy to help. I want them to live that out on a daily basis. And so bringing them along, postponing this branch removal from the neighbor's house by 3 hours didn't change anything about the branch, but I can tell you that the pride, the sense of accomplishment that came out of my 2 boys walking away from the neighbor's yard, chainsaw in hand. There's something about power tools and boys that just changes things. And I could have told them about my win at dinner and said, hey, we removed Miss Carrie's branch, but my win became theirs. And so I want you to start thinking in this mindset of service solves ego. Service is the antidote to ego. True leadership is about serving others well, not about perks, position, or power. I will tell you that a lot of times when I'm looking at new managers, and I'll say new contextually in the first 24 months of being in a position where they're leading others or they're responsible for others' results, a lot of times they will adopt a position of power in that position versus realizing firsthand that they don't just work for one person, their supervisor, their leader. They now work for 5 to 10 other individuals called their team members. A strong, secure leader accepts blame and gives credit. A weak, insecure leader gives blame and takes credit. This comes to us from John Wooden, multiple national championship basketball with UCLA. If there's somebody that I can look to for leadership principles, it's John Wooden. And if I can take anything away, it's strong, secure. Those things go together. Strong and secure leaders accept blame and give credit. It's really easy to blame sales on the sales team when we're not in sales. Maybe our position in the business is operations, or maybe it's marketing, maybe it's the service delivery to the customer, and we want to blame another department for a lack of either leadership or lack of results. Us as leaders, as owners, as key stakeholders in the business, it is our job to take the brunt of the blame and share or give the credit. So when we look at this, why does it freaking matter? Ego-driven leaders seek to be right. I paused there because I've been there. I have wanted so fervently to want to be right that I have disengaged or dismissed the team that looked to me for leadership. Service-driven leaders seek to do right. We talk about in our business results. We talk about integral results. Integral is the foundation of integrity. Doing the right thing for the right reasons at the right time because it's the right thing to do at the right time. That's how we define integral. And so ego-driven leaders seek to be right. The service-driven leaders seek to do right. Ego isolates, service connects. That culture of belonging that we want so desperately to create. Serving others actually strengthens our influence because people willingly follow those who serve them. John Maxwell is just a phenomenal leader. He's somebody that I have looked up to for the better part of 15, 20 years of my career, starting with some of his bigger books, going to some of his lesser known books. But one thing that I've taken away from the more than 70 books of John Maxwell and probably 50 plus that I've consumed and own physically is that leadership with no followers is simply a man going on a walk alone. If you have a team that reports to you because they get a paycheck out of you, you're not leading. If you have a team that shows up to do the job that needs to get done because it needs to get done, and that's it, they just so happen to be able to benefit personally and financially from it, you have found yourself in a leadership position. When I look at kind of what this looks like, some practical application to it. Ask, what does my team need to thrive? Instead of, what do I need from my team? A lot of times we as leaders, we will be in a position to where we need to delegate as many things off of our plate to make sure that all the things get done. In that mindset, in that singularity, we're not asking ourselves, what does my team need to thrive? What questions can I foresee them asking that I can answer in my explanation before they ask? Because I have the experience that they need, and I need to afford them experience outside of theirs. Regularly join the frontline work to stay connected. I will tell you that whether it's sales or client onboarding or HR calls, one of the biggest things that I find a lot of value in, and this is a cultural thing, because if you just show up sporadically on your team members' client calls or maybe internal coaching calls, it becomes very big brother and very boss-like. But when you make it a regular practice to join the front lines, to be a support, I was having a conversation with a team member earlier this week, and I told them, I'm simply here to support and to serve. You can ignore me completely, but if you get stuck, if you face a barrier that you're either not sure how to handle, or maybe you don't know how to answer it in the best way, deflect to me. I'll take the brunt of that question, and I'll answer it, and I'll give it right back to you. And I will tell you that the facial features of this team member were going from a little bit of stress and anxiety going into that difficult conversation to at ease and knowing that they had strength in numbers. Celebrate team contributions before mentioning personal achievements. I made it a practice years ago, and almost to a detriment. I very rarely talk about me and I. I almost always talk in the frame of we and us. And I would encourage you, as maybe you're coming into this and maybe you're a solopreneur, or maybe you have a team of 150, 200 employees, or you're somewhere in the middle. I would encourage you to do this at home, in office, in the private spaces of your life. Become more we focused than me focused. I was called out on this. It was years ago I was at the airport, and a gentleman asked me what I did, and I was in a HR consulting firm that I had built and started and began to scale. But at the time, it was simply me. But I had a team of infrastructure behind me, but I was the only employee of the organization. And he asked me, a bunch of questions, and I always said, we are, and we do, and we. He goes, man, this sounds really impressive. How many team members do you have right now? Because it sounds like a big team. And I said, to be very frank with you, I'm the only one on payroll, but I can't do what I do without the 20, 30 people behind the scenes that will never be seen by a client. I can't do it without them. So that's why I include them in the collective we, because there's no me without the we. I would encourage you, as you think through maybe your own language and your own talk tracks, think through, am I being more me focused in my delivery, or am I more we focused in my delivery? When you were made a leader, you weren't given a crown. You were given the responsibility to bring out the best in others. Jack Welch, if you're familiar, he grew and led GE, or General Electric, for years and years and years. And one of the things that I have gleaned from all of his kind of sound bites and some of his books that he's written is that it was never about Jack. It was always about mainly his leadership team, because he knew that if he could lead his leadership team well, they would then lead the teams well. And this is an organization of tens of thousands of employees across the globe. And if that type of leader is others focused, and he has every right to build himself up and say, Jack did this, and without Jack, you couldn't have done this. But he constantly deflects to the team of we. What is the value? I always go back to what's in it for me, the WIFM. So leave it to me to pull data, but what does it mean when we are a servant leader versus a leader of selfish ambition? We have greater profitability. If you're on this call, you want to grow and scale your business, and you're always looking for, how do I grow if I don't generate more revenue? How do I grow if I can't build my sales team the way that I want to? A study of servant leaders saw a 6% increase in job performance, an 8% rise in customer service ratings, and 50% higher employee retention rate. To put context on all of that, put that through the lens of your own business. Wherever you're coming in from a average contract value, add 6%. What does that number look like? When you look at average profitability per job, what's 8% look like when customers are satisfied and they're willing to be a disciple and not just looking for a discount? 50%. We know that it cost us 133% of anything that we pay out in gross wages and compensation to replace that employee in productivity. If you can shore that up by 50%, maybe your turnover rate is only 20% right now. If you could shave off 50%, so you're only turning over 10% year over year while increasing the profitability of each one of those team members through increased performance, what does that look like for your business? Superior earnings. Organizations with highly engaged employees, a common outcome of servant leadership, outperform competitors by 147% in earnings per share. If you look at your nearest competitor, whether they're in the market or in your industry, if you had one opportunity to do something better that would change the trajectory, and you know statistically it's going to yield 147% higher earnings per share, would you do it? That's what we're talking about with servant leadership. Improve customer service. Servant-led teams contribute to an 8% improvement in customer service. So again, going back to profitability per customer interaction. And this is the one that really kind of takes the cake. We find ourselves in the small and medium-sized business disengaged or maybe disconnected from the S&P 500, but servant-led companies show an average of 24.2% in pre-tax profitable portfolio returns. To give you context, S&P 500 companies, the top 500 companies in the market, in the American economy, target and aim for an average 10%. So with that context, servant-led companies showed an average of 24.2% in pre-tax portfolio returns. If you take your book of business, whether that's 10 clients, 10,000 clients, doesn't matter. Servant-led companies show more than double the performance in pre-tax portfolio returns. If that is not a compelling reason to take action on the last 3 weeks of our content, I don't know how else to convince you, because I'm a touchy-feely guy, but at the end of the day, data moves me. Servant leaders act as stewards, fostering ethical behavior, transparency, and accountability. Sound familiar? Sounds like core values to me. This builds trust with both employees and external stakeholders, which can enhance a company's reputation and lead to sustainable long-term growth. If you are on this call, if you're in this training, this is our goal, not just to give you content for content's sake or to grow your top line to have a vanity number. It's to increase the company's reputation, lead with long-term growth in mind. That's why we start with the foundation, then we move to fortification, then we leverage that data to give us foresight, insight into being more profitable at the top end of each one of those pressure points in the business. So with that said, we've got a little bit of an activity, but it's more of a reflection. I want you to think through the empty plate simulation. So I want you to feel the difference between serving self and serving your team. What's one way you could eat last this week in your business or leadership role? Put that in the chat. What's one way you could eat last this week in your business or leadership role? Put that in the chat or put that in the comments section. I'd love to see the feedback in this. Leadership insight. Leadership isn't about how much you eat, it's about how much you give. I will tell you that it fills my stomach more to know that each one of my children step to the table hungry and leave satisfied. Not full, satisfied. And it's not until then that I feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude for what's been given to me that I didn't earn or deserve, the resources, the gifts, the talents that I've been given to steward over my family, my friends, and my fellow business partners. I want you to take that really to the bank of what you need to do. And then let's move into some reflection questions that I'll leave you with to kind of ponder and go into over the next several days. But what would it feel? How would it feel if you had less than your team? Maybe less compensation, less resources. Maybe you're affording them something different. How would you feel resentment, or would you feel pride? Would you feel proud? I'm reminded of a company that we worked with, still working with them, but we came into their business and there was not a whole lot to get excited about. We had to go into really pin down, very tactical blocking and tackling type of kind of addressing real needs real fast. One of the owners and one of the key stakeholders instantly saw the gap between what was needed and what could be afforded in the business at the time. And they unplugged about 20% of their earnings right there. Both of them completely unplugged 20 to 35% of their earnings right there until the business got right-sized revenue. We also had some difficult conversations about team members that we needed to exit out in order to save the greater team. How would your team respond when you sacrifice for them? I can tell you firsthand, this galvanized the company, the organization, and the team. That team looks and feels and sounds fundamentally different 18 months later from that one decision that is echoed through the corridors of their culture. How would it feel for your team if you had more than them? If you were that selfish leader, maybe you're coming in and maybe you're disproportionately asking for sacrifice, but then taking the meat off the altar. I want you to really assess how you're showing up. Do your words match your actions? And most importantly, do your actions determine the words? And then which scenario builds loyalty and which builds resentment? Do you feel like you are more ingratiated to your team when you're giving and serving, doing a better job of eating last? Or does the idea of eating last, of putting them before you, putting team above self, does that conjure up some feelings of possible resentment? These are heavy questions. I want you to be as objective as you can be and disclose as much as you're comfortable with. But as you reflect on this over the coming days, weeks, maybe even the next month, I want you to come out of this training, out of this first 3 parts of Leaders Eat Last. There's a hunger for true leadership in our work environment, and you can be the conduit to being the change that you want to see in the work environment. I want you to be a better operator, a better leader on the other side of these hard conversations and asking yourself these hard questions. Thank you for joining, and I hope to see you on the next one. Do you guys have any questions, any insights? Any feedback from the live audience? Yeah, agreed. Sometimes it feels like you're grasping for straws at what more can I do? And I would say instead of thinking of big overarching things, start to get granular. Maybe it's something that you say or something that you notice in that team member. I I'm often reminded, being in HR, I largely have teams made up of females. Um, and so there was, for a long time, this intimidation, or maybe even trepidation is a better word, around making comments about physical attributes. But what I found and what I kind of coined for myself a few years back was I will only comment about controllable attributes, something they did with their hair, an outfit, something that they directly did intentionally to drive a comment or a noticeability. I am telling you, I've given out thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in gift cards that don't equal the smile and gravity that I get with my team members when I make a comment about a controllable attribute. It's like they can't control how handsome they are, how pretty they are, how big or small their nose is. But if they did something with their hair, if they got a haircut, they colored their hair different, they did something, maybe they drove up in a new car that wasn't on the goals, or maybe it was. Like I got to celebrate the first purchase of a new car a few years back, and it was one of the most satisfying things that I've gotten to do in goal setting with a team member. We're not even talking about a terribly fancy car, but the target was that she could buy her first new car and she wouldn't have a payment. And both of those things got accomplished simultaneously. And it was joy-filled tears about something that she had never seen, never accomplished, and quite frankly, had never allowed herself to dream prior to that. So as you think and reflect, think about those little things, those controllable attributes on your team. And I know for the two of you, it could be more of a challenge because you're not physically with your team. But that's where I would get really granular into asking those open-ended questions, allowing them to tell you who they are, what they're doing, something that's deeper than just, here are our performance metrics and this is what we want to accomplish. But what wins did you have at home this last week? And I would say you're going to get radio silence for the first 2 or 3 asks of that cycle. But I can tell you, from a 9-year-old to a 14-year-old boy that doesn't verbalize his feelings very often, when you create an environment where people are looking for quantitative, qualitative wins, they'll come out. It's really awesome to see. And that's from, a 14-year-old boy that's still learning how to use his brain. So thank you guys for joining. Hopefully it was of value to you. But let me know if there's anything that I can do to better support on this end of this relationship. Have a great day.